Mahatma Gandhi once said, "If we are to teach real peace in this world, we shall have to begin with the children." While I agree with the great leader of the worldwide peace movement, I believe there is a lot that children can teach us about peace. And sometimes the biggest lessons start with simply asking the right question. It was 1982, a time when the world had been struggling with the Cold War for decades. The air was heavy with the threat of the nuclear weapons. A young girl, aged 10, asked her mother a question after seeing the latest cover of Time magazine with the newly appointed Soviet leader on it. "If people are so afraid of him, why doesn't someone write a letter asking whether or not he wants to have a war?" she said. "Why don't you?" was her mother's reply. And just like that, this child from small-town America wrote a letter to Yuri Andropov, a menacing figure who instilled fear in the entire Western world. This girl, Samantha Smith, became my childhood idol after posing the question that had been terrifying all the adults around her. Was Andropov planning to drop bombs on the US? He did not answer her. She wrote again. This time she got an answer, and with it, an invitation to visit the Soviet Union as his guest. Inspired by the friendliness of the people she met on this trip, Samantha Smith returned home with a simple message for her fellow Americans and the rest of the world. The Russians are just like us. The Russians are just like us. She broke the ice between her country and its long-standing nemesis. By doing so, Samantha single-handedly planted seeds for the Cold War to come to an end. It took one question to help end this global crisis. How did this ordinary young girl manage to do that? Especially in a time when she had no Google to search, no Siri to ask, and couldn't even send an email. All she had was her childlike innocence and compassion. That's what showed her the way. Connecting like children is a powerful key to problem solving for adults. Have you seen a child solve a problem? A child's way to solve a problem is by simplifying it. I have a young niece who only asks one question anytime she's about to meet someone new. What do they like? Once she learns what you might like, she rummages through her toy bins, she checks her bookshelves, her closet, to bring you everything she can find on the subject of your interest. Whether you're an animal lover, have a favorite cartoon character, or enjoy arts and crafts, she is sure to find some common ground with you. The communication is simple. The connection is instant, and it works every time. As we grow up, why do we lose this gift of simple human connections? And when do we start turning differences into problems? When I was growing up in the Soviet Union, I saw a lot of emphasis on happy childhood. Like many other children around me in my home country of Azerbaijan, I loved my life so much. I was looking for ways to reach out to children in other parts of the world, to share with them the joy we lived in. We had pen pals in other countries, and were always excited to connect with them. The community I lived in was built on care and compassion, which showed even more so in the times of need. The declining agriculture of the late 80s led to severe food shortages in my country. Almost overnight, we went from abundance to bare store shelves. Our families were put on food stamps to redeem for meager rations of bread and sugar, while everything else became luxury. We had to walk to a bakery in complete darkness at 4 a.m. to buy bread. One freezing morning, I dragged myself out of the bed and plowed my path through untouched snow piles to join a bread line. Unable to feel my frozen hands and feet, I stood there, the only child among the adults, wishing there was another way. Then this lady came up to me. She cupped my hands in hers and she said, "Why don't you go home, go back to bed?" In a few hours, when this woman brought the loaf to our doorstep, it was as if she gave the world to me. Looking back, what made her connect with me? Perhaps she saw me for what I was, a young girl who'd much rather stay home in bed than spend the rest of her nights outside in the cold. Isn't that how we see children? We are happy when they're happy. We are sad when they're sad. We connect with them so quickly. My happy childhood ended abruptly as the Soviet Union began to collapse. Azerbaijan was seeking independence. Soviet special forces turned against us. On January 20th, 1990, they invaded my home city, Baku, and drove their tanks through the streets, crushing everyone in their way. The tanks left the streets running with blood. That day, I lost my childlike innocence. For the first time, I saw that there no longer was protection or compassion. They were us, and they were them. It started right there, and it never went away. The us versus them, right versus wrong, good versus evil. This left no room for compassion. Over the course of the next 30 years, I saw this mindset play out on different continents and different cultures after living in 4 countries, learning 5 languages, and working in 3 careers. I wanted to do something about it. I started out as an investigative journalist, reporting on the plight of marginalized people. I saw the worst of humanity and the best. I spent time in prisons, orphanages, a leper colony. I met a night guard at a psychiatric ward who despised the patients in his care so much that he confessed. If he had a machine gun, he would have eradicated all of them. As terrible as it was to have the tanks drive through my city, in that moment, I saw a human version of those tanks, ready to roll over people. When we see people as them, it desensitizes us to the impact of what we do to them. Many of the people I met on that path, the panhandlers, the homeless, the convicts, were resigned from life as a result of how they were treated. By showing compassion, I got them to open up. I shared their stories to bring awareness and possibly solutions. The more questions I asked, the more it led to new questions, the ones that I could not answer. To make a bigger difference, I became a lawyer. By learning the legal framework, I hoped to provide better answers. I wanted to protect their human rights. This quest did not end when I moved to the US, then Canada, and joined the world of corporate management. In my years of working for corporations, I cannot count the number of times when people told me, what are they going to do about this? When will they listen to us? Compassion is not a word common to boardrooms or shop floor culture. The helplessness and resignation that come from this attitude lead to unsafe work conditions, anxiety, lost productivity, and so many other issues. Workplace illness and violence are real, and while prevention is the main cover story, we are yet to get to the why of it. From what I've seen, the us versus them perspective is not confined to one industry or one culture. Lack of compassion is a worldwide issue. There is West versus East, the right wing versus the left wing, the locals versus the immigrants, management versus workers. Silos have been built to keep us apart. But why? As adults, we find it hard to see beyond our own agendas. We forget that we all started out as children. We were filled with compassion, able to connect innately. Is it our circumstances that created this disconnect? As we grow up, we adopt preconceived notions from our surroundings. We get conditioned by the society. We accumulate life experiences, really traumatic ones at times. As a result, we stop trusting people. We suspect they have hidden agendas. We promise ourselves that we won't get hurt again. To back up our own promise, we put up walls between us and other people. We focus on what's different or what's wrong about them. Every negative experience brings our walls a little higher. But instead of helping us, these defense mechanisms do more harm. They separate us further, and they become the root of new problems. Can you think of any walls you have built in your life? Small walls, big walls, walls you can't see over anymore? Underneath this all, we still have a child that lives inside each of us. And that child never stops needing love or compassion. That's why sometimes the person you need to protect is you. You don't stick around when someone shows you lack of compassion. You refuse to tolerate abuse. Because if you allow yourself to stay under constant attack, most likely you will gain an illness, or you will turn around and spread that anger to others around you. Remember how it was as a child when you could just take your marbles and go home? By removing yourself from those harmful situations, you are protecting so much more than yourself. You're protecting everyone else who comes in contact with you. And that's how you learn to show compassion and to honor true connections. Compassion and connection help us solve the problems we share. When we connect with people, we gain so much more than warm, fuzzy feelings. When we connect with people, our brains open up, we start working together, and together we overcome the very dynamic that has been causing the issues. No ego, no expectations, no hidden agendas, like a child. If we are to teach real peace in this world, we shall have to begin with the children. These are Mahatma Gandhi's words. And while I could not agree more, I believe there is a lot that children can teach us about peace. And sometimes you don't even have to go too far for those lessons. I had a neighbor once, an adorable little boy from Ethiopia. He was only 3 or 4 years old when I saw him at the playground in front of my house. This boy went up to the new kid in the neighborhood, a little girl about his own age. As he approached her, he did something at a first glance a bit odd. He pulled out his waistband and he showed her his Spider-Man-themed briefs. He proudly announced that he was wearing a big boy underwear. The little girl did not find this the least odd. She simply said that she too was wearing a big girl underwear. And just like that, these two strangers started playing together and became the best of friends. They didn't notice any of their differences. All they needed was the one thing they had in common. Now, I'm not suggesting that we come up to people and show them our underwear, but I am suggesting that we open up to childlike ability to connect. With her childlike innocence, Samantha Smith asked one question that ended up solving a global crisis. Now, I have a question for you. if you could bring yourself to the most compassionate, the most innocent place inside you, what kind of questions would you ask to help us solve the problems we are facing today? Seeing those problems through the eyes of a child is a key to asking the right questions. I believe this perspective can help our families, our workplaces, and others around the globe. It can help us shift from living in a world of conflict to living in a world of compassionate, connected, problem-solving people. This is my idea worth spreading. Thank you.